My name is Pete Reynolds, 67 years old, retired owner of a construction company that I built with my own two hands. Worked hard my entire life to give my only son Jackson everything I never had growing up. But last Father's Day showed me how little that meant to him when he handed his father-in-law a set of keys to a luxury car and gave me a pair of $2 slippers from the discount store. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Before I tell you what happened after that Father's Day, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. I grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, son of a factory worker who taught me the value of honest labor. Nobody handed me anything. When I was 17, I started working construction jobs during summer breaks. By 25, I had saved enough to buy my first truck and hire 2 guys to work with me. 30 years later, Reynolds Construction employed over 60 people and had contracts all over the state. Not bad for a kid who barely finished high school. I met my wife Margaret at a local diner where she waited tables while going to nursing school. We married young and struggled at first, living in a tiny apartment where we could hear the neighbors arguing through the paper-thin walls. But we were happy. When Margaret got pregnant with Jackson, I worked double shifts to save for a down payment on our first small house. We never lived extravagantly, even after the business took off. Margaret insisted we stay grounded, and I agreed. What was the point of showing off? I drove the same pickup truck for 15 years, only replacing it when the transmission finally gave out. We lived in a nice home, but nothing flashy. I saved instead of spent, thinking about Jackson's future. Jackson was our only child. Margaret had complications during his birth that prevented us from having more kids, so we poured everything into him. I made sure he had opportunities I never did. I coached his Little League team, despite working 60-hour weeks. I put money aside every month for his college fund from the day he was born. When Jackson wanted to join the travel soccer team, I paid the fees without question, even though they cost more than my first car. When he needed braces, I covered it. When he wanted a computer for school projects, I bought the best one the store had. I wanted him to have the tools to succeed, but I also taught him that he had to earn his place in the world. Margaret was the one who kept him humble. She insisted he work summer jobs in high school. She made him volunteer at the hospital where she worked. She wanted him to understand that not everyone had what we could provide for him. When it came time for college, Jackson got accepted to Westridge University, a private school with a prestigious business program and a price tag to match. $40,000 a year for tuition alone. I remember swallowing hard when I saw the numbers, but I wrote the checks. I sold a piece of land I had been holding onto for retirement to cover his first 2 years. I never told Jackson about that. Margaret said it would make him feel guilty, and that was not what we wanted. Jackson graduated with honors. I sat in that audience, bursting with pride as he walked across the stage. Margaret cried. That was one of the best days of my life. Jackson got a job at a marketing firm in Philadelphia after graduation. He met Stephanie there. She came from money. That was obvious from the first time we met her. She had that polished look of someone who never had to worry about bills. Nice girl, but different world than ours. Her father, Richard Thompson, was some big-shot executive at a financial services company, the kind of man who wore cufflinks that probably cost more than my first truck. When Jackson and Stephanie got engaged, Margaret and I hosted a simple but nice engagement party at our house. Richard and his wife Catherine arrived in a car with a driver. Richard made a point of mentioning the bottle of wine he brought cost $300. I just nodded and opened the $20 bottle I had bought because Margaret always said it was our favorite. The wedding was fancy, more elaborate than anything we would have planned. Richard insisted on paying for most of it. I contributed what I could, but it was clear my input was not really wanted. The wedding planner Stephanie hired kept calling me quaint when I made suggestions. Margaret never got to see them married. She was diagnosed with cancer 6 months before the wedding. It moved fast, more aggressive than the doctors anticipated. She made it to the rehearsal dinner, but was too weak to attend the ceremony. She watched it on a video call from her hospital bed. She died 3 weeks later. Losing Margaret changed everything. The house felt empty. The business lost its purpose. I had built it for us, for our future, and suddenly that future was gone. I kept working for another 2 years, but my heart was not in it anymore. I sold the company to my foreman, Tony, who had been with me for 20 years. He gave me a fair price, enough to live comfortably in retirement. After Margaret died, I noticed the shift in my relationship with Jackson. We had always been close, but now there was a distance. He called less frequently. His visits became shorter and more obligatory. I told myself he was busy with his new marriage, his career. I made excuses for him because that was easier than acknowledging the truth. Stephanie and Jackson bought a house in an upscale suburb of Philadelphia, not far from her parents. I visited them once, about 4 months after they moved in. The house was impressive, much larger than they needed. I asked Jackson how they could afford it so early in their careers. He mentioned something vague about Richard helping with the down payment. I nodded and changed the subject. Family gatherings became uncomfortable exercises in pretending. Richard dominated conversations, talking about his golf trips to Scotland or the new boat he bought. He would ask about my business in a way that felt like he was patting me on the head. Construction, that is honest work, he would say, as if I ran a lemonade stand instead of what had been a multi-million-dollar company. I tried to maintain my relationship with Jackson. I called him weekly. I remembered his birthday and sent thoughtful gifts at Christmas. I invited him to ball games and fishing trips, like we used to enjoy. He was always too busy. There was always some work event, some obligation with Stephanie's family. Last Father's Day, I had been looking forward to spending time with Jackson. He had promised to come for lunch, just the two of us. I spent the morning preparing his favorite meal, the pot roast Margaret used to make. I set the table with the good dishes we rarely used. I even bought a nice bottle of bourbon to share with him. The morning of Father's Day, I woke up early with anticipation. Jackson had promised to arrive around noon, and I wanted everything to be perfect. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, even though I lived alone, and there was not much mess to clean. I wanted it to feel welcoming. I prepared Margaret's famous pot roast recipe, the one Jackson always raved about as a kid. The smell of it cooking filled the kitchen, bringing back memories of Sunday family dinners, when Jackson would tell us about his week at school, and Margaret would laugh at his animated stories. I set the table with the good china we only used for special occasions. Margaret would have approved. At 11:30, my phone rang. It was Jackson. "Hey, Dad. Slight change of plans. We're at Stephanie's parents' house for brunch. We'll head your way after. Probably be there around 2 instead of noon. That okay?" I swallowed my disappointment. "Sure, son. The food will keep." "Great. Thanks for understanding." 2 o'clock came and went. At 2:30, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Jackson's BMW, the one he had financed despite my advice to buy something more practical. Jackson and Stephanie walked to the door, both dressed like they were coming from somewhere important, rather than a family brunch. Jackson carried a small gift bag. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," Jackson said, giving me a quick hug before stepping inside. Stephanie offered a polite smile and a brief embrace. "Sorry we're late," Stephanie said. Daddy kept opening more champagne. You know how brunches go. I did not, actually. In our house, brunch had been pancakes at the kitchen table, not champagne affairs that ran hours long. We sat in the living room. Jackson handed me the small gift bag. "It is not much, but we thought you would like it," he said. Inside was a pair of slippers. Basic brown cloth slippers with thin soles, the kind you might grab from a display near the checkout at a discount store. The price sticker was still partially visible on the bottom. $2. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "My old ones are pretty worn out." "That is what I told Stephanie," Jackson said. "Dad's practical. He does not need anything fancy." Stephanie was scrolling through her phone. She turned the screen to show Jackson something, and they both smiled. "Dad, you have to see what we got for Richard. He's going to flip when he sees it later." Jackson took the phone and handed it to me. On the screen was a photo of a sleek, silver luxury car with a giant red bow on the hood. A Mercedes, brand new from the looks of it. 45,000? I asked, my voice catching slightly. It was 47,000 actually, but I got them to come down a bit, Jackson said proudly. Richard has been talking about this model for months. He does so much for us. We wanted to do something special for him. We had to take out a loan, Stephanie added, but Daddy deserves it. He paid for our honeymoon in the Maldives last year, so this is our way of saying thank you. I handed the phone back, not trusting myself to speak. A loan. My son took out a loan to buy his father-in-law a luxury car, while stopping at a discount store to pick up $2 slippers for me. I am sure he will love it. I finally managed. We moved to the dining room for the meal I had prepared. Jackson barely touched the pot roast. "We are still full from brunch," Stephanie explained. Catherine had the caterer prepare this amazing spread. The avocado toast with crab was to die for. The conversation revolved around Richard's upcoming retirement party, the vacation Stephanie's parents were planning to Italy, and the promotion Richard had helped Jackson secure at work by putting in a word with the company's CEO, who apparently was Richard's golf buddy. Not once did Jackson ask about my life, my health, or what I had been doing. When I tried to share a story about running into his old high school baseball coach, Jackson checked his watch. "Speaking of time," he interrupted, "we should probably get going soon. Richard's Father's Day dinner starts at 6, and we still need to pick up the car from the dealer." "But you just got here," I said, unable to hide my disappointment. "I know, Dad, and I am sorry. But this is important. Richard went all out for my birthday last month, flying us to New York for a Broadway show and dinner at that famous chef's restaurant. We need to make his Father's Day special too." They left just after 4, having spent barely 90 minutes with me. The pot roast was largely uneaten. The bourbon remained unopened. The slippers sat on the coffee table, one of them still showing the remnants of the $2 price tag. After they left, I sat alone in my recliner, the one piece of furniture I had refused to replace over the years because it was where I used to sit with Jackson on my lap, reading bedtime stories. I stared at those slippers for a long time, turning them over in my hands, feeling the cheap material. It was not about the monetary value. I had never cared about expensive things. It was what they represented. The thoughtlessness. The clear message that I was an obligation to be handled with minimal effort, while Richard deserved a $45,000 thank you. I put the slippers back in their bag and placed them in the hall closet. I did not think I would ever wear them. Every time I looked at them, I would remember this day, and that was not a memory I wanted to keep alive. That night, after spending Father's Day largely alone, I could not sleep. My mind kept replaying the afternoon, analyzing every word, every expression on Jackson's face. Had I done something to deserve this treatment? Had I failed him in some way I did not understand? I got up around midnight and went to the basement where I kept boxes of family photos and mementos. I pulled out the album from Jackson's childhood, the one Margaret had meticulously maintained. Photos of Jackson's first steps, his first day of school, his baseball games and science fairs. In every picture he was smiling. In many, I was right beside him, my arm around his shoulders, pride evident on my face. One photo caught my attention. Jackson at 10 years old, holding up a model rocket we had built together. We had spent every evening for 2 weeks working on it in the garage. I had missed an important client meeting to attend the rocket launch at his school. The client had been angry, but I never regretted it. The look on Jackson's face when that rocket soared into the sky was worth more than any contract. Another photo showed Jackson at 16, standing next to the used car I had bought him for his birthday. Nothing fancy, just a reliable sedan. We had argued about it. He had wanted something sportier, more impressive to his friends. I had explained that a first car should be safe and practical. He had been disappointed, but came around eventually. or so I thought. I remembered the sacrifice behind that car. I had been saving for a fishing boat, something I had wanted for years. But Jackson's car came first. Always. His needs came first. There was a photo of Jackson's college graduation. By then, the business was doing well, but those tuition payments had still been substantial. I had never told him about selling the 5 acres of land I had purchased as an investment for our retirement. That land would be worth triple now, but I had never regretted selling it. Education was the best investment I could make in my son's future. As I flipped through the album, I came across a photo that made my heart ache. Jackson at 7, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. Margaret had captured the moment perfectly. Both of us laughing, cotton candy in Jackson's hand, pure joy on our faces. That little boy who adored his father seemed so far removed from the man who had sat in my living room today, eager to leave for his father-in-law's party. I closed the album and reached for my phone. It was late, past midnight, but I needed to talk to someone who would understand. I called my brother Thomas, who lived in Colorado. Despite the time difference, he answered on the 3rd ring. "Pete, everything okay?" "Sorry for calling so late, Tom. Just needed to talk." I told him about Father's Day, about the slippers and the luxury car, about Jackson rushing off to celebrate with Richard. Thomas sighed. "I hate to tell you this, Pete, but Jackson called me last month asking if I could contribute to the car fund for Richard. Said all the family was chipping in for something special. He never mentioned anything to me about it," I said, feeling another sting of exclusion. "There is more," Thomas said reluctantly. "When I asked about you, he said Richard had been more of a career mentor to him than you could be. Said Richard understood the modern business world in ways you did not. That hit me like a physical blow. All those years of hard work, building a business, employing dozens of people, navigating economic downturns and industry changes, and my son thought I had nothing to offer him about business. Has he said anything else about me?" I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. Thomas hesitated. He mentioned at Christmas that he was glad Stephanie's family could host because, and I am quoting here, "Dad's house is kind of depressing since Mom died, and he refuses to update anything." I had not even known they were at Stephanie's parents' house for Christmas. Jackson had told me he and Stephanie were going on a ski trip with friends from college. I had spent Christmas alone, watching old movies, and trying not to feel sorry for myself. After talking with Thomas, I did something I had avoided. I looked at Jackson's social media accounts. Margaret had set up a Facebook account for me years ago, but I rarely used it. Now I scrolled through Jackson's profile, seeing months of posts I had never seen before. There were photos from a trip to the Bahamas 3 months ago. Jackson, Stephanie, Richard, and Catherine on a yacht. The caption read, "Annual family vacation with the people who matter most." This was during the week Jackson had told me he could not visit because he was swamped with work projects. There were pictures from holidays I thought he had spent with friends. Thanksgiving at Richard and Catherine's lavish home. Christmas morning opening presents around their enormous tree. New Year's Eve at some exclusive party. In each caption, he referred to them as family, as the people who mattered. I found a post from 2 months ago that made my stomach turn. A photo of Jackson and Richard on a golf course, cigars in hand. The caption, "Learning from the best. So grateful for a father figure who shows me how success is really done in today's world." Father figure. The words felt like a knife. I kept scrolling and found a post about their house, the one I had visited once. It showed before and after photos of a kitchen renovation. The caption thanked Richard for his generous contribution that made their dream kitchen possible. So it was not just the down payment Richard had helped with. I turned off the phone, feeling sick. All those years of sacrifices, of putting Jackson first, of working myself to exhaustion to give him opportunities, and he was ashamed of me. He saw Richard as a role model, as the father he wished he had, a father who could buy him expensive things and introduce him to important people. The next morning, I called Jackson, hoping to have an honest conversation about how I was feeling. The call went to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me back when he had a moment. He texted a response hours later. "Super busy this week, Dad. Talk soon." I tried again the following day. Another voicemail, another brief text excuse. For a week, I attempted to reach out. Each time, I was brushed off with increasingly terse responses. It became clear Jackson was avoiding a real conversation with me. Then, scrolling through my email, I found something that made the entire situation even more painful. It was a draft email from Jackson to Richard that had been accidentally sent to me as well. It appeared to be part of an ongoing conversation. "Richard, thanks again for the advice on handling Dad. You're right that he can be a bit much sometimes with all the old stories and blue-collar wisdom. I appreciate you showing me a different way of looking at things. Dad means well, but he just doesn't get how the world works now. Looking forward to the golf trip this weekend." I sat there, staring at those words, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath me. My son was not just prioritizing his relationship with Richard, he was actively diminishing his relationship with me. He was embarrassed by me, by my blue-collar wisdom and my old stories. All those baseball games I never missed. All those late nights helping with school projects. All those extra jobs I took to pay for summer camps and college applications and graduation trips. All the times I put his needs before my own. None of it seemed to matter now. What had I done wrong? Had I not given him enough? Had I given him too much? Had I failed to teach him the values that mattered, like gratitude and respect? Or was it simpler than that? Was Richard's wealth and status simply more attractive than my modest success and simple lifestyle? Had Jackson decided that the path to happiness was through association with people like Richard rather than people like me? Whatever the reason, the truth was undeniable. My son had chosen his father-in-law over me, and that realization broke something inside me that I was not sure could be repaired. 2 weeks after Father's Day, I received a letter from my bank. It was a notification about a wire transfer request that needed my authorization. The amount, $75,000. The recipient account belonged to Jackson. I had not spoken to Jackson about any wire transfer. I called the bank immediately and told them I had not authorized this transaction. They put a hold on it and suggested I contact the person who had initiated the request. I called Jackson. For once, he picked up on the first ring. "Dad, I was just about to call you," he said, his voice unusually animated. "Did you get the wire transfer form from the bank?" "I did," I said carefully, "but I have no idea what it is for." $75,000, Jackson? What is going on?" "Oh, I thought I mentioned it," he said, his tone suddenly casual. "Stephanie and I are doing some home renovations, finishing the basement, upgrading the main bathroom, that sort of thing. The contractors need a deposit to get started." Something did not add up. Even extensive renovations would not require a $75,000 deposit. "That seems like a lot for a deposit," I said. "Well, you know how these things go," Jackson replied. "Costs add up quickly, and we want to use the best materials. It is an investment in the house's value." I had been in construction my entire working life. I knew exactly how these things went, and this was not it. "Jackson, I would like to see the quotes from the contractors before I transfer any money." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Dad, do you not trust me? I am not a kid anymore. I know what I am doing." "It is not about trust," I said, though in truth, it was. "I just want to understand where such a large amount of money is going." "Fine," he said, his tone clipped. "I will have them email you the quotes." The quotes never came. Instead, 2 days later, I received an email from a business address I did not recognize. The subject line read, "Thompson Reynolds Investment Opportunity." The email was from Richard Thompson, and it detailed a unique investment opportunity that he was offering to a select group of family investors. According to the email, Jackson had expressed interest in investing $75,000 in this venture, and Richard was graciously extending the opportunity to me as well. So this was the truth. The money was not for home renovations. It was for some business scheme with Richard. I called Jackson immediately. "Why did you lie to me about the money?" I asked as soon as he answered. "Dad, I can explain," he started. "You told me it was for home renovations. Now I get this email from Richard about some investment opportunity." "I was going to tell you the truth," Jackson said, his voice defensive. "I just thought you might not understand the opportunity. Richard has connections to this tech startup that's about to go public. It's a guaranteed return on investment." "Nothing is guaranteed in investments, Jackson. You should know that." "See, this is why I did not tell you," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "You always think you know better. Dad, construction is different from modern business. Richard understands these opportunities. He has made millions on investments like this. If Richard has made millions, why does he need your $75,000? Or my $75,000, for that matter?" "It is not about need," Jackson said, as if explaining something to a child. "It is about opportunity. He is letting us in on this because we are family." "No, Jackson. He is family to you. He is a stranger to me. A stranger who seems to have convinced my son that I am some kind of out-of-touch old fool." "Dad, that is not fair," Jackson protested. "Nobody thinks you are a fool. Then why lie to me? Why not just tell me the truth about what the money was for?" There was silence on the line. Then I heard Jackson's voice, muffled, as if he had partially covered the phone. He was talking to someone else in the room. "It is Dad," I heard him say. "He is upset about the investment thing." Then, clearly not intending for me to hear, he added, "Do not worry. He will give us the money. He always does." Those words hit me like a physical blow. He always does. As if I was nothing more than an ATM to him. As if all our relationship amounted to was what I could give him financially. "Jackson," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "I heard that." "Dad, I did not mean." "Yes, you did. And that's the problem. You meant every word." I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the phone down. I sat in my chair, staring at nothing, for what felt like hours. The next day, I drove to the cemetery where Margaret was buried. I had not been there in months. It was too painful. But now I needed to talk to her, even if she could not answer. I sat on the bench near her gravestone, surrounded by the quiet of the cemetery. "I do not know what to do, Margaret," I said aloud. "I think I have lost him. Or maybe I never really had him the way I thought I did." A light breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby oak tree. Margaret had always loved that sound. "You would know what to say to him," I continued. "You always knew how to reach him when he was being stubborn." I stayed there for over an hour, talking to Margaret, crying sometimes, thinking about all the years we had spent raising Jackson, all the hopes we had for the kind of man he would become. As I sat there, a clarity began to form in my mind. I had spent my entire adult life putting Jackson first. I had sacrificed my time, my money, my opportunities for him, and the result was a son who valued me so little that he thought nothing of lying to me to get money for his father-in-law's investment scheme. I had enabled this behavior. I had taught Jackson, through my constant giving, that I existed to provide for him. I had failed to teach him the importance of reciprocity in relationships, of respect, of gratitude. This was not just about the money. It was about what the money represented. It was about the $2 slippers versus the $45,000 car. It was about he will give us the money. He always does. It was about being treated as an obligation rather than a father deserving of love and respect. I realized then what I needed to do, not just for myself, but for Jackson too. Because continuing as we were was not helping either of us. It was time for a change, a painful but necessary one. The day after my visit to Margaret's grave, I called my lawyer, Frank Simmons. Frank and I had been friends for 30 years, since the early days of my business when I could barely afford his fees. He had handled the sale of my company and managed my will and estate planning. "I need to make some changes," I told him when we met in his office. "Significant ones." Frank leaned back in his chair, his expression concerned. What kind of changes are we talking about, Pete? I explained the situation with Jackson, the Father's Day incident, the attempted wire transfer, the investment scheme with Richard. Frank listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. So what are you thinking? He asked when I finished. I want to change my will, I said. Currently, everything goes to Jackson. I want to change that. Frank looked at me carefully. Are you sure about this, Pete? These decisions should not be made in anger. I am not angry, I said, though that was not entirely true. I am disappointed, and I am clear-eyed about who my son has become and what he values. I do not want to reward that. Over the next 2 hours, Frank and I restructured my estate plan. I decided to donate 30% of my assets to the Westbrook Vocational Training Center, the place that had given me my start in construction when I was a directionless teenager. Another 30% would go to establish college scholarships for kids from my old neighborhood who could not afford higher education. The remaining 40% would still go to Jackson, but with conditions. He would receive a modest monthly allowance, enough to help but not enough to fund a lavish lifestyle. The bulk would be held in trust until he turned 50, with provisions that he demonstrate financial responsibility and charitable giving of his own before receiving the full amount. He is not going to be happy about this, Frank warned as we finalized the paperwork. I know, I said, but this is not about making him happy. It is about doing what is right. My next step was to meet with a real estate agent. My house, the one Margaret and I had bought 20 years ago, was too big for just me. It was filled with memories, many of them painful now. I decided to sell it and buy something smaller, more manageable. Within a week, I had listed the house and found a modest 2-bedroom condo in a nearby town. The condo was in a building with other retirees, people my age, who organized community dinners and card game nights. It felt like a place where I could start fresh. I also contacted the director of the Westbrook Vocational Training Center. We arranged a meeting to discuss how my donation could best be used. The director, a woman named Diana Franklin, was passionate about expanding their programs to include modern construction techniques and green building practices. With your donation, we could reach so many more young people, she told me, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Give them the same chance you had. The sense of purpose I felt after that meeting was like nothing I had experienced since selling my business. For the first time in years, I was excited about something, invested in something larger than myself or my family's needs. Through all of these changes, Jackson continued to call and text, asking about the money. I did not respond. I needed time to get everything in order before confronting him. Finally, 3 weeks after Father's Day, I invited Jackson to meet me at a local diner. I chose a public place deliberately, thinking it might help keep the conversation civil. Jackson arrived late, looking harried. He slid into the booth across from me. Dad, I have been trying to reach you for weeks, he said, not bothering with a greeting. Did you get my messages about the wire transfer? I did, I said calmly. And the answer is no. I will not be transferring $75,000 to you for Richard's investment scheme. Jackson's face flushed. Dad, you do not understand. This is a huge opportunity. Richard is doing us a favor by letting us in on it. No, Jackson. Richard is using you to get access to my money, and you are letting him because you value his approval more than you value our relationship. That is not fair, Jackson protested. This has nothing to do with our relationship, doesn't it? I asked. You gave that man a $45,000 car for Father's Day. You gave me $2 slippers. You lie to me about where you spend holidays. You talk about Richard as a father figure while dismissing my blue-collar wisdom in emails. How is that not about our relationship? Jackson's eyes widened. You read my emails? You sent it to me by mistake, I said. But that is beside the point. The point is that I have enabled this behavior by always giving you whatever you ask for. And that stops now. What is that supposed to mean? Jackson demanded. It means no to the $75,000. It means no to any future financial requests. It means I have changed my will and sold the house. You what? Jackson's voice rose, causing several diners to turn and look at us. I have sold the house, I repeated. I am moving to a condo next week, and I have restructured my will. Most of my estate will go to charity now, specifically to the vocational training center that gave me my start, and to scholarships for kids who cannot afford college. Jackson stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and anger. You cannot be serious. That money is supposed to be my inheritance. Why? I asked, simply. Because you are my son? What have you done to honor that relationship, Jackson? When was the last time you called me just to talk, not to ask for money? When was the last time you showed me the same respect you show Richard? This is not fair, Jackson said, his voice shaking. You are punishing me because you are jealous of Richard. I am not jealous of Richard, I said, though perhaps there was some truth to that. I am disappointed in the man my son has become, a man who values people based on what they can give him materially rather than emotionally. Richard would never do this to Stephanie, Jackson blurted out. He supports her unconditionally. No, he buys her affection, I corrected. There is a difference, and the fact that you cannot see that difference is exactly why I am making these changes. Jackson stood up abruptly. I cannot believe you are doing this. After everything Mom and you always said about family coming first. Family does come first, I agreed. But family is about mutual respect and love, not one person continually taking while the other continually gives. Fine, Jackson snapped. Keep your money, but do not expect me to come running when you are old and need someone to take care of you. That hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I kept my expression neutral. I would rather have no one than have someone who is only there out of financial obligation. Jackson stormed out of the diner, leaving me sitting alone. Several people were still watching me, curiosity and pity in their expressions. I paid the bill and left, my heart heavy but my resolve unchanged. Over the next week, I finalized the sale of my house and prepared to move to the condo. Jackson did not call or text. I told myself this was for the best, that we both needed time to process what had happened. I donated much of my furniture to a local shelter, keeping only the pieces that had special meaning. The recliner where I had read to Jackson, the dining table where we had shared family meals, Margaret's favorite reading chair. The rest I let go, another step in the process of starting fresh. When moving day came, I found myself standing in Jackson's old bedroom, now empty of everything except memories. I remembered the night he was born, how tiny he had seemed in my arms, how overwhelming the love I felt for him had been. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike in the driveway, bandaging his scraped knees when he fell, celebrating when he finally managed to pedal on his own. For a moment, I questioned what I was doing. Was I being too harsh? Was I throwing away a relationship that could still be saved? But then I remembered his words. He will give us the money. He always does. And I knew I was making the right choice, the only choice that might eventually lead to a healthier relationship between us. I closed the door to his room and walked away, ready to begin a new chapter. The first week in my new condo passed quietly. I arranged my remaining furniture, introduced myself to my neighbors, and began volunteering at the Westbrook Vocational Training Center 2 days a week. The routine gave my days structure, and the volunteering gave them purpose. I had just begun to adjust to my new life when the calls from Jackson started. The first came exactly 3 weeks after our meeting at the diner. It was late, almost 11 at night, when my phone rang. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. "Dad," he said when I answered, his voice tense. "We need to talk about what is happening with Richard." "What about Richard?" I asked, genuinely confused. He expected the investment money by now. Stephanie and I promised we would contribute $75,000. He has already counted our share in the total investment. Now he is angry that we backed out. "You did not back out," I corrected. "I refused to give you the money. There is a difference." "Whatever," Jackson said impatiently. "The point is, he thinks we led him on. He is treating Stephanie differently now. He barely spoke to us at dinner last night. I am sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it. But that is between you and Richard. Dad, please. Jackson's voice took on a pleading tone I had rarely heard from him as an adult. Just reconsider. This is affecting my marriage. If your marriage depends on me giving you $75,000, then there are bigger problems than I can solve. You just do not understand, Jackson said, frustration evident. This is about more than money. It is about family loyalty. Yes, I agreed. It island. And that works both ways, son. The call ended shortly after, with nothing resolved. But it was only the beginning. Over the next 2 days, Jackson called me 5 more times. Each call became more desperate than the last. Richard, it seemed, was not just giving them the cold shoulder. He was threatening to withdraw his support for Jackson's upcoming promotion at work, where Richard's influence carried significant weight. He says if I cannot even manage my own finances, I am not ready for a management position, Jackson told me during one call. By the end of the week, I had received 14 calls from Jackson. Some I answered, others I let go to voicemail. The messages became increasingly frantic, painting a picture of Richard's growing disappointment and Jackson's mounting anxiety. Dad, please call me back. Things are getting worse with Richard. He canceled our golf club membership, saying if we cannot afford to invest, we cannot afford the annual dues either. Dad, Richard told Stephanie, he is reconsidering paying for our trip to Europe next month. She is devastated. Please, we need to talk. Dad, I do not know what to do. Richard is talking about selling the boat now because we did not come through with our part of the investment. That boat was supposed to be a family legacy. The situation came to a head exactly 23 days after our diner meeting. My phone rang non-stop that day, call after call from Jackson. I was at the vocational center, helping a group of young students learn to read blueprints, so I had my phone on silent. When I checked it during a break, I had 23 missed calls and a series of increasingly desperate texts. Dad, Richard is saying he might have to sell their house and downsize because the investment fell through. This affects everyone. Dad, please answer. This is an emergency. Dad, I am begging you. If not for me, then for Stephanie. The last text simply read, I am coming over. I had not given Jackson my new address, but apparently he had found it. I left the vocational center and drove home, unsure of what to expect. When I arrived, Jackson was sitting on the steps outside my building, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, and I was shocked by his appearance. He had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His usually immaculate clothes were wrinkled, as if he had slept in them. Jackson, what happened to you? Everything is falling apart, Dad, he said, his voice hoarse. Richard has cut us off completely. He says I embarrassed him in front of his investors. Stephanie barely speaks to me. I might lose my promotion. It is all crumbling, and it is your fault. My fault? I repeated. How is any of this my fault? If you had just given me the money like I asked, none of this would be happening. I sat down beside him on the steps. Jackson, listen to yourself. You are a grown man blaming your father for not giving you $75,000 to invest in your father-in-law's business scheme. Do you not see how wrong that is? You do not understand what is at stake, he insisted. Richard has connections. He has been opening doors for me that you never could. The words stung, but I remained calm. And now you see the price of those open doors. They close just as quickly when you do not do what he wants. Dad, do not do this, Jackson pleaded. Just reconsider. It is too late for the investment, but maybe you could give us something to smooth things over with Richard. Show him we are still committed to the family. I am not giving you money to buy back Richard's affection, I said firmly. That is not how real relationships work. Then what am I supposed to do? Jackson demanded, anger replacing his desperation. Watch my marriage fall apart? Watch my career stall? Is that what you want? What I want, I said carefully, is for you to remember who you are. You are not just Richard Thompson's son-in-law. You are Jackson Reynolds, my son. You are smart and capable on your own terms. You do not need to buy anyone's approval. Easy for you to say, Jackson muttered. You do not have to live with the consequences. Neither do you, I pointed out. You are choosing to accept those consequences, rather than standing up for yourself. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the tension between us palpable. Can I at least come inside? Jackson finally asked. I drove straight here from work. I have not eaten since breakfast. I nodded and led him up to my condo. It was the first time he had seen it. He looked around, taking in the smaller space, the familiar furniture arranged in new configurations. It is smaller than I expected, he commented. It is all I need, I replied. I made us sandwiches, a simple dinner like the ones we used to share when he was a teenager, and Margaret was working night shifts at the hospital. We ate in awkward silence at first, but gradually began to talk about neutral topics. The weather, a recent sports game, the neighborhood. After dinner, Jackson asked to use the bathroom. When he returned, his expression had changed. He seemed less agitated, more thoughtful. I saw the pictures in the hall, he said. The ones of us from when I was a kid. I nodded. Those photos were among the few decorations I had put up so far. Jackson at various ages, always with me or Margaret or both of us. Snapshots of a happy family. I had forgotten about that fishing trip, he said, referring to one of the photos. The one where I caught that huge bass, and you were so proud you insisted on getting it mounted. You were 10, I recalled. That fish was almost as big as you were. A ghost of a smile crossed Jackson's face, then vanished. Dad, I do not understand why you are doing this. Why now, after all these years of supporting me? I considered my answer carefully, because I finally realized that by always giving you everything you asked for, I was not helping you become the man I know you can be. I was enabling you to take the easy path, to value things over relationships, appearance over substance. That is not fair, Jackson protested, but with less conviction than before. Isn't it? I walked to my bedroom and returned with a box I had kept through the move. I placed it on the coffee table in front of Jackson. Open it. Inside were dozens of cards and letters Jackson had written to me and Margaret over the years. Birthday cards made by hand when he was small. Thank you notes for Christmas and birthday gifts. Letters from summer camp and college. Read them, I suggested. Jackson picked up a card from the top, one he had made for Father's Day when he was 8. The outside showed a crayon drawing of the two of us fishing. Inside, in a child's careful handwriting, it read, To the best dad in the world. Thank you for always being there for me and teaching me important stuff. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Love, Jackson. He put the card down and picked up another, a letter from his first year of college. In it, he thanked me for the sacrifice of paying his tuition, promising to make me proud and to do the same for his own children someday. As Jackson read through more cards and letters, I could see the emotion building in his face. These were tangible reminders of a relationship that had once been built on love and respect, not just financial transactions. I had forgotten, he said quietly, holding a thank you note from his high school graduation. I had forgotten how much you did for me. I did not keep these to make you feel guilty, I explained. I kept them because they meant something to me, because you meant something to me. Not as an investment or an obligation, but as my son. Jackson looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of the boy he had been. I have really messed up, haven't I? It was a beginning, not an ending, a small crack in the wall between us. But as Jackson left my condo that night, we were still far from reconciliation. He was confused, torn between his loyalty to Richard and the uncomfortable truths he was beginning to recognize about himself and our relationship. I did not expect an immediate change. Years of patterns could not be undone in a single evening, but I had planted a seed, and that was enough for now. Autumn arrived, painting the trees around my condo complex in vibrant reds and golds. My life had settled into a new rhythm. 3 days a week at the vocational center, teaching young people the skills that had served me well. Card games with my neighbors on Thursday evenings. Sunday morning coffee at the local diner, where I'd become a regular. I had not heard from Jackson in almost 6 months. After that night at my condo, he had sent a brief text thanking me for dinner and saying he needed time to think. I respected that and gave him the space he asked for, though the silence was painful. I thought about him often, wondering how things were with Stephanie, with Richard, with his job. I was tempted many times to call or text, but I resisted. This was a journey Jackson needed to take on his own terms. The leaves had nearly all fallen when my doorbell rang one Sunday afternoon in early November. I was not expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Jackson stood there, hands in his pockets, looking nervous. "Jackson," I said, surprised. "Come in." He stepped inside, glancing around as if checking whether anything had changed since his last visit. "The place looks good," he commented, more settled. "I have had time to make it home," I replied. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Just water is fine." We sat in the living room, an awkward silence stretching between us. Jackson fidgeted with his water glass, clearly gathering his courage to say something. "Dad," he finally began, "I owe you an apology. A big one." I waited, giving him space to continue. "The way I treated you was wrong. Not just the Father's Day thing, but everything before that too. Taking you for granted. Choosing Richard's approval over our relationship. I see that now." "What changed?" I asked gently. Jackson took a deep breath. Richard's investment venture failed, completely. Everyone who invested lost everything. It turns out he was not the financial genius he claimed to be. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "That must have been difficult for everyone involved." Jackson nodded. "It was, but it opened my eyes too. When the investment failed, Richard changed. He started blaming everyone else, including me for not contributing what I had promised. Stephanie and I got into huge fights about it. Our marriage nearly fell apart." He paused, taking a sip of water. "One night, after a particularly bad argument with Stephanie, I found myself driving around, just trying to clear my head. I ended up at our old house, forgetting for a moment that you had sold it. Seeing strangers living there, seeing their children playing in the yard where I grew up, it hit me hard. I realized how much I had taken for granted. It is easy to do," I said. "We often do not appreciate what we have until it is gone." After that night, I started thinking about the things you said, about what really matters in relationships. I looked at how Richard treated Stephanie when things got tough, how he withdrew his support, his affection, when she disappointed him, and I compared that to how you always stood by me, even when I messed up. Jackson met my eyes directly. "You never made your love conditional, Dad. Even when you said no to the money, you never said you were done with me as your son." I did not see that distinction then, but I do now. I felt a tightness in my chest, a mixture of pain and hope. "It has never been about the money, Jackson." "I know that now," he said, "and I am ashamed. It took me so long to see it." We talked for hours that afternoon. Jackson told me about the fallout from the failed investment. Richard had indeed pulled strings to block Jackson's promotion. He had canceled family gatherings and made it clear that Jackson and Stephanie were no longer in his inner circle. Stephanie had been devastated at first, but eventually began to see her father's love for what it was, conditional, based on compliance rather than genuine affection. "Stephanie and I nearly separated," Jackson admitted, "but we started counseling. The therapist helped us see how we had both been seeking external validation rather than building our relationship on mutual respect. We are working on it now, trying to create something healthier." "That takes courage," I said. "I am proud of you for that." Jackson smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "There is something else you should know. I left the marketing firm. I was tired of playing politics, tired of depending on people like Richard for advancement." "What are you doing now?" "I started my own small digital marketing agency. It is just me and two other people right now, but we are landing clients. It is honest work, building something from scratch. He paused. Kind of like you did with your construction company. The parallel was not lost on me. How does it feel, being your own boss? Terrifying, exhilarating, like I am finally standing on my own 2 feet. Jackson leaned forward. Dad, I do not expect you to change your mind about the will or the money. That is not why I am here. I just wanted you to know that I understand now, and I am sorry. I studied my son's face, seeing in it a new maturity, a hard-won wisdom. It was never about punishing you, I told him. It was about helping you find your own way, your own strength. It sounds like you are doing that now. I am trying, he said, and I would like to try something else, too. I would like us to rebuild our relationship, if you are willing. The next few months were a slow, sometimes awkward process of reconnection. Jackson began stopping by my condo regularly, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes to help with small projects around the place. We talked about his new business, about my volunteer work, about neutral topics at first, gradually working our way toward more meaningful conversations. Christmas was approaching, and Jackson invited me to join him and Stephanie for dinner at their house. It would be just the three of us, he explained. They had declined Richard and Catherine's invitation to their annual party. Are you sure? I asked. I do not want to cause more problems between Stephanie and her parents. Stephanie made the decision herself, Jackson assured me. She says she wants to start new traditions, ones that are about what we value, not what impresses other people. Christmas dinner was simple but warm. The house looked different than I remembered, less showy somehow. Jackson explained they had sold some of the expensive furniture and artwork to help fund his new business. The space felt more like a home now, less like a showroom. After dinner, Jackson handed me a wrapped gift. It is not much, he said, echoing the words he had used on Father's Day. But I hope you like it. Inside was a handmade wooden picture frame containing a photo of Jackson and me from his childhood, fishing at the lake. Along with it was a certificate showing a donation in my name to the Westbrook Vocational Training Center's scholarship fund. I cannot match what you have given them, Jackson explained, but I wanted to support what matters to you. I was too moved to speak for a moment. This gift represented something far more valuable than the slippers had. It showed understanding, respect, shared values. Thank you, I said simply. This means a lot. As the new year began, our healing continued. Jackson asked me to advise him on his business, valuing my experience in a way he never had before. I introduced him to some of the young people at the vocational center, and he offered to teach them about digital marketing, giving them skills that could complement their trade training. Stephanie and I developed a relationship of our own, one not overshadowed by her parents or defined by material expectations. She confided that she was seeing her father more clearly now, recognizing patterns in his behavior that had affected her own outlook on life and relationships. By the time Father's Day came around again, much had changed. Jackson and Stephanie invited me for a backyard barbecue at their house. No expensive gifts, no comparisons to Richard, just family enjoying each other's company. As we sat on their patio watching the sunset, Jackson turned to me. You know, Dad, I have been thinking about what you did last year, changing your will and all that. Oh? I said, wondering where this was going. I want you to know that I think you made the right decision. The money should go to those scholarships and to the vocational center. They will do more good with it than I would have. I studied my son's face, seeing the sincerity there. Are you sure about that? He nodded. I am building my own life now, my own success. It feels good, knowing I am doing it myself. Besides, the best inheritance you gave me was not money. It was the example you set, even though it took me way too long to appreciate it. I felt a profound sense of peace in that moment. The journey had been painful, the lessons hard-won. But sitting there with my son, I knew we had found our way to something authentic and valuable, a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than obligation or expectation. The material things, the money, the status symbols, none of that mattered in the end. What mattered was the truth we had found together, that love without respect is hollow, that giving without wisdom can harm rather than help, and that sometimes the greatest gift a parent can offer is the freedom to fail and the space to grow. If you're watching this and have experienced similar family struggles, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Has someone's actions ever made you feel undervalued? How did you respond? Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the most growth. Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself can be an act of love. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true family bonds are built on respect, not obligation.